Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Saturday, which means it's the 31st, the last day of January. A large amount of information has come in related to Epstein and the Epstein files. I will be going through them while telling you about it at the same time. There's been another surge of interest. You're all aware of this. This is related to the fact that on January 30, the United States Department of Justice released a huge amount of materials on the Jeffrey Epstein case. There are 3 to 3.5 million pages of documents, photos, videos, and memos, all within the framework of the Epstein File Transparency Act, which in Russian would be something like Epstein Case Transparency, which Trump signed back in November 2025. Yes, so what exactly is new? Because, well, it's a huge amount of material. Of course, you can gossip and make jokes, but what new information has come out? According to the Justice Department, the final major batch of files has been released. There might be some smaller batches later, but who knows? FBI and prosecutors' investigative materials, all sorts of internal memos, correspondence between different agencies, a draft of the indictment, so basically they're clearing everything out, putting out everything they have because, well, the boss ordered it. Well, there are dozens of alleged episodes of human trafficking, if you translate it from English, as they call it, and the corruption of minors. So it's not just 17-year-olds involved. There are also 14 and 15-year-olds. And that means that some of this relates to the first Epstein case, when he was supposedly convicted, and then everything was swept under the rug. Everyone pretended he was never tried, that he never corrupted minors, and he was accepted back into society. The documents contain a lot of correspondence featuring well-known names, correspondence with these people, because both of these individuals are mentioned. Trump, who everyone is interested in, Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, a bunch of billionaires, political donors, owners and co-owners of major companies, including sports clubs and financial companies. At the same time, it is clearly emphasized that simply being mentioned in the materials is not evidence of a crime. By the way, Al Jazeera wrote a big article about this, which is for their own audience. The point is, just because someone is mentioned there doesn't mean they're involved in anything. It's just that Epstein had a bunch of financial dealings and everything else related to that. So, in one of the published drafts of the indictment, the prosecution in the 2000s considered, I think, 30 or 2 counts against Epstein, including some unbelievable things like conspiracy, recruiting minors, conspiracy. What they mean is that he wasn't acting alone, but was organizing a group of people, and that increases the degree of responsibility and punishment. Trips, flights on his Lolita for sexual activities, for illegal sexual activities, as they say, which shows how a very serious case was reduced to a lenient plea deal in 2008. So there was so much going on there, just to make sure, God forbid, nothing was proven against him so he wouldn't start talking. So why did this cause such a stir? Well, now it's the year 2000, sort of, right? And this Epstein Files Transparency Act made it mandatory. Ben Newston made all the materials public by December 19, 2025, but the agency was very late and only released part of them. This is our new one for January, on the last day of the month. The release is the largest, most politically sensitive batch. There's a lot in there. Of course, they tried to pretend that they, overlooked it, forgot, didn't include it. There are already debates about what exactly is still hidden, who they're trying to cover up, to protect, and so on. Why do people believe more is hidden? Because these were covered up and now released. So they wonder if there's still something else. Yes, so the congressmen who pushed for this law include, among others, Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie. Now they are demanding access to unedited versions, specifically to the full testimonies of the victims, internal memos, and indictments. They suspect that the Justice Department under the Trump administration cut out some names and details, which is quite possible. And it's not necessarily just about party affiliation, Sometimes things are redacted for other reasons as well, right? So there's a particular stir caused by the sensational, often unproven accusations in Epstein's private correspondence. For example, gossip about the personal life of Bill Gates and his contacts with Russian women. So previously there was talk about one Russian woman, but now for some reason there are already some other Russian women being mentioned. The media and social networks are quickly spreading this, although the files themselves emphasize that many of these claims are, at the very least, unverified and may be purely gossip. The new Epstein files mention Trump frequently, but it's important to distinguish between facts, like contacts, flights, and correspondence, and mere rumors or unverified claims. None of the published victims still say that they personally suffered abuse from Trump or that they had any, as they say, inappropriate contacts. There wasn't, I mean, even if she did have contact with him, he was very nice, courteous. There was, so to speak, no persuasion, no violence, nothing like that. So, in the 3 million document archive, Trump's name appears more than 1,000 times in letters, internal memos, news printouts, and tip off spreadsheets. A significant part of it is how Epstein himself and his circles sent each other articles about Trump. Articles about Trump. That is like something was written in Pravda that I should quietly tell you about, in case someone might hear. They discussed his policies, gossiped about his family, and also talked about other people's reports and theories. In the new batches of files, it's confirmed that in the 90s, Trump flew on Epstein's plane several times before their conflict and falling out. An official prosecutor's letter mentions at least 8 flights they took together from 1993 to 1996, including flights with Ghislaine Maxwell. There's nothing wrong. It's just mentioned. So, in other words, Ghislaine knew Trump well. Again, well, yes, she was quite, so to speak, at an age where she could have known anyone. The materials also specifically state that neither Trump nor Bill Clinton are accused in these documents of any specific incidents of violence, and that simply appearing in photos, blogs, or records is neither a crime nor evidence nor anything else. There was just someone, and they mentioned him. In a recent FBI report, a statement from a person was recorded, and there he was identified as 3, well, in Roman numerals. Roman numerals 3 means stick, stick, stick. In 2021, this person stated that Maxwell provided one of the victims to Trump at a party in New York, actually presenting the girl as a resume of her merits. Well, it's not very clear what that means because at that time he was involved in a lot of things. So, well, 2021 is already, that's already much later, so. No, wait, no, 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 I misunderstood. In 2021, she said that some time ago she had provided a girl to Trump, telling him about her qualities. I think Trump owned the Miss Something pageant, so he probably got introduced to a lot of girls. The same victim, according to the witness, later went on a tour of Mar-a-Lago but the witness emphasizes, I know nothing at all. So, what happened between her and Trump, I don't know. And apparently she just went on the tour and left. So, okay, it's an unverified accusation and an old one. So, Jane Doe, as they call her when they don't want to use a real name, they say Jane Doe, meaning they don't want to reveal the name. That's the first and last name. Yes, in the files, there's a compiled table put together by the FBI with calls to the hotline where people often anonymously reported alleged facts about Trump's crimes. Also, he killed, stabbed, quartered, or hanged someone. There were also reports of rapes involving women, men, dogs, horses, and even elephants, but none of them have been confirmed so far. There's a separate blog related to women under the pseudonym Jane Doe. That is, they don't want to give their real names, like I went into a department store or something like that. Trump saw me, pushed me, Jane, into the locker room and removed my clothes. I tried to scream but couldn't. My throat was so dry and he raped me, then left. And I had 6 children from him, all of whom drowned in the river on the way. So in 2016, someone named Jane Doe filed a lawsuit. Well, that was back when the Democratic Party was trying to sink Trump, claiming that he raped her when she was 13 years old. Well, yes, so in the new files, there's an FBI interview transcript. FBI, of course, still from the Obama era, where she repeats these accusations, and also records showing that the case was closed because they didn't find any evidence. Besides that, Trump said, "Who is this?" There are no new victims who are now coming forward with allegations of abuse by Trump personally in the released documents. It's about restating, unpacking, and internally processing accusations and rumors that were already known before 2016. So after that, we sent him 3 times from the Republican Party to run for president. And he actually won 3 times, but twice he made it to the presidential seat. So, in Epstein's letters, Epstein regularly discusses Trump with political and media figures. Mostly he criticizes Trump, and the words he uses can't be repeated, they need to be censored. He uses the best words to call Trump a maniac, but at the same time, he warns the Democrats not to tighten the noose too slowly. In other words, they need to get rid of this maniac quickly, 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 or else, and so on. So he argues with Steve Bannon about personnel decisions in the administration. They had a correspondence. Do you remember who Steve Bannon is? Epstein sends materials to Steve Bannon about sexual allegations against Trump and writes, "This could destroy him," but in the end, nothing was confirmed. It was all a lie. Yes, there are also official Department of Justice and FBI documents related to internal policy. How did the Trump administration hesitate with fully disclosing the Epstein materials, promising transparency to supporters but dragging out the process itself, which is now being actively criticized in Congress? Anything new or interesting about Bill Clinton? The new files contain excerpts from Epstein's interrogations. This is from 2016 in the Virginia Giuffre case. To all questions about Bill Clinton, Epstein answers that he will not incriminate himself, meaning as soon as they ask about Clinton, he immediately refuses to testify against himself. They were all afraid of the Clintons. So many people around the Clintons died who said anything other than the Fifth Amendment. So Epstein didn't give a single substantive answer. He was afraid of the Clintons, just as one should actually be afraid of them. So the files record well-documented previous contacts, Clinton's flights on Epstein's plane, and appearances on guest lists. In all the photos in the jacuzzi, he seems to be naked, but it's not very clear. In New York, on the island, the materials emphasize that the very fact of communication or flights is not yet proof. And so on, well, it is, but at the same time, it isn't, outside of the files themselves. So Clinton, now under pressure from Congress, the House of Representatives is moving forward with the issue of finding Bill and Hillary Clinton guilty of what is called contempt of Congress for refusing to testify in the Epstein investigation, which could result in fines, something that doesn't concern the Clintons. They've stolen so much, I don't even want to say the word. They've taken so much of our money without asking us. But it could lead to jail time. Well, like a couple of people from Trump's cabinet, from his administration. Now, Bill Gates is also interesting. In this pile, there are 3.5 million papers and so on. There are drafts of letters and all sorts of Epstein's notes with completely unverified and scandalous claims that Gates allegedly contracted venereal diseases. Here it's already from Russian girls, and, well, he puts it all together like Gates and Russian girls were up to something, and he got infected with something from one of them or from them. That Gates asked to get antibiotics, keeping it a secret from his wife. Well, that's kind of nonsense. Gates couldn't have not turned to Epstein. That Gates was supposed to ask Epstein for antibiotics. Well, that's nonsense, right, Gates? who, at that moment, basically had half of the world's medicine under his control. And some associate of Gates supposedly said that he went crazy or something. Yes, that Gates paid so much money for silence that it was just insane. It was already public knowledge from Gates's press secretary. He personally stated that these claims are absurd and that the files only show Epstein's obsessive attempts to create the appearance of closeness to Gates and to use any stories to blackmail him. So, in the future, well, we definitely know about one Russian girl, so both sides are lying as I understand it. Overall, regarding Gates in the new release, it's mostly old photos, mentions of joint events, and Epstein's correspondence with Epstein. So there's nothing there. You won't find any victim testimonies. Now, Elon Musk. The documents contain several email chains between Musk and Epstein. Here they are. Possibly people who either acted on behalf of or pretended to act on behalf of. That's possible because there are a lot of questions like that where you have to say, damn, is that really Musk? And there they discuss possible exposures, even the question of when they're flying to the island, as well as the logistics of the helicopter to the island. But there's no evidence anywhere that he flew. I mean, there is evidence about others, but not about this one. So, Musk himself, in response to the publications, insists that he had very limited communications with Epstein and that he supposedly avoided close contact. He also publicly demands the release of all documents to show their content. Prince Andrew concerns us less. Yeah, well, the accusations against Virginia are examined in detail there, meaning her accusations against him by Virginia Dayajufra, the very same one who died, well, was killed, most likely. She had sexual contact with Andrew when she was underage. That's exactly why the crown, meaning the English queen, kicked him out, basically sent him packing. He earned some money there, but no longer joins any gatherings, which is mainly how everyone there makes a living. So, Andrew paid a large sum directly to Giuffre, which didn't help her, but she didn't have time to spend that money. Now, Steve Bannon, he's the former chief strategist of the White House. They discuss political topics there, about Mnuchin, about Powell, some internal struggle within the Trump administration. Epstein offers his services as a mediator. Basically, he was always trying to insert himself and then capitalize on it. Again, there aren't any. Now they're talking about the owner of the New York Giants, Steve. Tisha, it turns out, also in general, some kind of to be continued. It's still unclear from all this. It's not clear yet who else is involved. What other famous figures? There's Woody Allen. Yes, old photos and records of joint events appear, but there's nothing conclusive. The director there is Brad Ratner, a photo in Epstein's house, including with other figures from the entertainment industry. So there are billionaires, financiers, including Richard Branson. They had a party and they would fly to each other, meet with people, and socialize there. So it's unclear, so to speak, who exactly was involved in what they're being accused of. Yes, even Govard Lacknick used to be there. So these are just messages, meetings, fundraisers, who knows what else. In general, for almost all these people, the overall picture is that there are contacts, shared evenings, and flights together. Sometimes there's some very unpleasant social language. Well, they write bad words there, the kind you usually don't say around children under 5. But in the files themselves, there's nothing factual, no evidence of crimes. That is, no one says, oh, there's a wonderful girl, I'd like to meet her, or anything like that with 2 or 3 others like her. Yeah, nothing at all. In short, that's it. The legal situation for Clinton, Trump, Musk, and others remains mostly the same, but the political and reputational impact grows. There's this toxic background around everyone who is associated with Epstein. Legally, nothing has changed. There are no new indictments in the new 3 million pages. The main political blow for Trump isn't in the new facts, but in how his administration looks. Most voters, including part of his base, are unhappy with how the administration delayed the release of the files. This hurts his image as a fighter for transparency, For Clinton and the Democrats, the main risk is their behavior around the investigation, Bill and Hillary's refusal to testify, the threat of being held in contempt of Congress, and possible sanctions for obstruction. It seems like they have something to hide. I don't know about this case, but generally they do hide things. Musk and Gates are now top donors. Uncomfortable correspondence, dirty, sometimes outright gossipy stories prove that billionaires are just like everyone else, sometimes even much worse, but they don't provide verified facts about crimes. The legal risk is minimal. I don't know about the reputational risk, the oligarchs of Kremlin Valley. Those who had a negative attitude towards them will continue to do so, and those who consider them our heroes today will also continue. So, but the systemic effect, that's where the real systemic effect exists for them. There are more questions for the institutions than for specific names. The real blow is to the Ministry of Justice, the FBI, and the judicial system, which let Epstein avoid serious charges for years. He had already been accused of was involved in the corruption of minors and, in addition, in supplying minors, that is, well, underage pedophiles, that very circle of pedophiles. Yes, maybe there was someone else, but he was definitely who they meant. That can't be. That can only happen in Germany. In Germany, they found something serious. I think it was about 10 years ago, but not here. How could that be? Maybe some isolated case, but something on such a large scale. No, no, no. It was quite widespread. That they had enough strength to pull Epstein out and bring him back to a normal life, where he was accepted again, and things like that. For specific billionaires and politicians, it's just a continuation of the same scandal. A huge amount of noise, conspiracy theories, talk shows, but without any real breakthrough in the legal field. So, at least at this stage of publication, if it turns out that there are still a few things that were hidden, that would be a serious scandal. But for now, as they say, that's not really the case. And, well, practically, of course, the Democrats will try to smear Trump and the Republicans will try, so to speak, to smear the Clintons. But by and large, nothing else has happened apart from that. And so far, you can't say that you should expect someone to put together something like that, something explosive to come out. There just isn't anything like that. Well, that's basically it. I mean, it's not interesting to me anymore. There's nothing that would make me say to myself, wow, that's really interesting. From the perspective of noise and hype, of course, now there will be new noise, new hype again, so to speak. And they haven't dug up anything against Trump. Well, they really haven't found anything at all. The only thing you can really talk about is, why did the guys hide this for so long? It's kind of strange. Again, unless there's something else there. How would we know? Maybe we'll find out, or maybe we'll never know. We can't predict that, right? Yes, that's all. Goodbye. See you next time.